The humiliation was thick in the air. "Don't you ever talk back to me, Colton?" The white man hissed, his voice low and dangerous. "You are nothing here, nothing clean. This room now, or don't bother coming back tomorrow, sir. The floors are neat. I've cleaned them over and over again." Naomi the black cleaner replied, but without a word, Colton took a full cup of water and poured the entire water directly onto Naomi. The cold water drenched her hair, ran down her face, soaked through her uniform shirt, and pulled at her feet on the freshly mopped floor. The shock of the cold liquid made her gasp, but it was the deliberate cruelty of the act that stole her breath entirely. "Now you have something real to clean up," Colton said. But little did he know that he didn't just humiliate a cleaner, but the very woman who had the power to crash down his entire career. Before we move properly into the story, click on the subscribe and like button if you believe no one should be unfairly treated, no matter who they are. Then type in the comments where you're watching from. You will definitely get a reply to your comment. The shiny floors of Bennett Innovations' executive floor reflected the harsh fluorescent lights as Jasmine Bennett, disguised in a maintenance uniform, carefully guided her mop across the polished surface. The nameplate on her chest read, "Rita, not Naomi." Bennett, the hands that had signed million-dollar contracts, now gripped a mop handle red and raw from Industrial Cleaning Solutions as she worked the click of expensive leather shoes approach from behind. Colton Myers, operations manager, a man who'd never looked her in the eye during executive meetings, now loomed over her with a stack of reports clutched in his manicured hands. Naomi's eyes, normally confident and commanding, in boardrooms flashed with a contained fury. Her jaw clenched as she quietly nodded and bent down to retrieve the now soaking papers. Every fiber of her being wanted to stand up, reveal her identity, and fire this man on the spot. But that wasn't the plan. That wasn't why she was here. Naomi William, the brilliant 29-year-old Wharton Business School graduate with her designer suits and commanding presence. Naomi had earned the respect of industry leaders and was featured in Fortune 40 Under 40 for her innovative approach to sustainable technology. Bennett Innovations wasn't just any company founded by Malcolm Bennett, Naomi's father, 36 years ago. In his garage with nothing but a dream and $2,100 borrowed from his grandmother, it had grown into a fintech giant valued at over $5.2 billion. Malcolm had broken barriers as one of the few black CEOs in Silicon Valley. Malcolm Bennett, now 62, had built his empire on two principles: innovation and integrity. His silver stray hair and deep laugh lines spoke to decades of challenges overcome. But lately his normally vibrant complexion had taken on a low quality. The heart attack 7 months ago had been a wake-up call for the entire Bennett family. Doctors had been blunt. Malcolm needed to reduce his stress levels immediately. The 75-hour work weeks that had been his norm for 3 decades were no longer an option. Succession planning, which had been a theoretical discussion for someday, suddenly became urgent. Naomi, as his only child, and the executive who had been groomed for leadership since her graduation, was the obvious choice to take the reins. But Malcolm had concerns that kept him awake at night. Concerns he finally voiced during a quiet family dinner at his modernist home overlooking the city lights. "Naomi, you know I couldn't be prouder of everything you've accomplished." Malcolm began, his deep voice carrying the warmth and authority that had inspired thousands of employees over the years. "Your business acumen is extraordinary. Your technical knowledge is impressive, but I'm worried about what you don't know. Naomi sat down her fork, her perfectly arched eyebrow, raising in question. What don't I know, Dad? Malcolm sighed, the weight of his legacy heavy on his shoulders. You don't know what it's like in the trenches. You've never seen how the company operates from the ground up. You've never experienced how management treat the people who keep this company running, but don't have fancy titles or corner offices. Naomi started to protest, but Malcolm raised his hand when I started this company. I was the janitor, the accountant, the salesman, and the engineer. I knew every aspect of my business because I'd done every job. That perspective is invaluable. The reports that cross your desk don't tell you about the culture that exists beyond the executive floor. His eyes, so similar to Naomi's, held genuine concern. I've been hearing things, Naomi whispers, about how different the company culture is from what we intended, but everyone puts on a show for the boss and family. You can't lead what you don't truly understand. The challenge hung in the air between them. Naomi never want to back down from a challenge, leaned forward. What are you suggesting, Dad? The plan they developed that night was audacious. Naomi would go undercover as a member of the night cleaning crew for 2 weeks. No special treatment, no shortcuts, no privilege she would experience. Bennett Innovations, the way thousands of employees did from the bottom rung of the corporate ladder. The transformation was dramatic. Naomi's designer wardrobe was replaced with simple, worn clothes. Her SLE sack straightened hair was allowed to return to its natural curls, then covered with a simple headscarf. Her immaculate manicure was removed, and her signature makeup look abandoned. Contact lenses replaced her recognizable designer glasses. The diamond studs that never left her ears were exchanged for simple metal. Hoops gone was the polished executive replaced by Rita, an unremarkable cleaning woman who would fade into the background of corporate life. Malcolm arranged for her placement through a third-party cleaning service proc, clean ensuring that no one in HR would make the connection. Her background check and paperwork were handled with the utmost discretion, creating a foolproof cover identity. As far as anyone at Bennett Innovations, new Rita was simply a new cleaner assigned to the executive floor. The stakes were clear. Naomi had had 2 weeks to understand the true culture of the company. She would soon lead 2 weeks to determine if the company her father had built still reflected the values he had instilled at its founding. What she didn't know was how those 2 weeks would transform her understanding of Williams' innovations and her entire worldview. The next day, Naomi, now fully transformed into Rita, stood nervously adjusting her ill-fitting G uniform as she waited for her first shift to begin. Her hands were now bare, and she couldn't stop fidgeting with the unfamiliar employee badge clipped to her chest. Naomi's first night as a cleaner began at 10 p.m. Long after most executives had left the building, the orientation was brief and impersonal. A hurried walk through of cleaning protocols, safety regulations, and a stern warning that theft of any kind would result in immediate termination and potential criminal charges. The supervisor barely made eye contact as he handed her a ring of keys and a checklist of duties throughout her life. Naomi Bennett had commanded attention as Malcolm Bennett, daughter as a Wharton graduate, as an executive vice president of their other company. People noticed when she entered her room. They made eye contact. They acknowledged her presence as Rita the cleaner. She might as well have been a ghost. Working executives stepped around her without a word, sometimes even bumping into her cleaning cart without an apology. When she entered offices where people were still working, they continued their conversations as if no one had entered, discussing confidential business matters. without a second thought about the invisible person emptying their trash by the end of her first day. Naomi had developed calluses on her once soft hands and had learned to move with the efficiency of someone who couldn't afford to waste energy. She had also begun to see patterns in how different employees treated the cleaning staff. Each day revealed new aspects of Bennett innovations that Naomi had never imagined existed, despite years as an executive. The pristine company her father had built, with its stated values of respect, integrity, and innovation, looked very different from the bottom looking up by the start of her second day undercover. Naomi Bennett, still disguised as Rita, the cleaner, had begun to adapt to the physical demands of her new role. The muscle aches had dulled to a persistent throb rather than sharp pain. Her hands had developed calluses where blisters had once formed. She had learned to distribute her weight properly while mopping to minimize back strain, but no amount of physical adaptation could prepare her for the psychological warfare that Colton Myers, operations supervisor, was about to unleash. Colton Myers prided himself on running a tight ship at Bennett Innovations. At 46, he had climbed the corporate ladder through sheer determination and a reputation for getting results, regardless of the human cost. His perfectly pressed shirts, meticulously styled hair, and ever-present leather portfolio projected an image of control and authority. What few people in management realized was how differently Colton behaved when dealing with those he considered beneath him, particularly the cleaning staff. To the executive team, Colton presented himself as efficient and dedicated to the cleaning crew. He was a tyrant whose unpredictable mood foods and impossible standards made their already difficult jobs nearly unbearable. "This is unacceptable," he declared on their first inspection, holding up a glove with a barely perceptible smudge after checking above a ceiling vent, an area not even on the regular cleaning rotation. "You people need to understand that Bennett Innovations represents excellence in everything." Everything, he demanded, the entire third-floor East Wing be recaned, forcing the team to stay 2 hours past the end of their shift without additional pay, when Maria attempted to explain that the area above the vents was scheduled for quarterly deep cleaning. "Not nightly maintenance, Colton Cutter. Off. If I wanted excuses, I'd ask for them. What I want is competence, which seems to be in short supply around here." While Colton's general treatment of the cleaning staff was harsh, he seemed to take particular pleasure in targeting Naomi. Perhaps it was because she was new and hadn't yet learned to make herself scarce when he appeared. Perhaps it was because something in her demeanor, a residual confidence that was difficult to completely disguise, triggered his need to assert dominance. Whatever the reason, Colton made Rita his personal project. No matter how meticulously Naomi cleaned, J-World found fault. Windows had streaks visible only when viewed at specific angles. With a flashlight, carpets had microscopic pieces of lint that required a third, vacuuming stainless steel surfaces that gleamed under normal inspection suddenly revealed unacceptable fingerprints when Colton examined them during her first solo shift cleaning the executive restrooms. Colton arrived for a surprise inspection while she was still in the middle of the work. Rather than waiting for her to finish, he began his inspection, immediately criticizing her progress, her technique, her choice of cleaning solutions, and even the way she organized her cart. "Are you deliberately trying to be this incompetent, or does it just come naturally to you?" he asked, loud enough for anyone in the vicinity to hear. "This is exactly why we should outsource all cleaning to robots. At least they follow instructions correctly the first time Naomi bit her tongue as she absorbed the insult in her role as executive VP. She could have ended Colton's career with a single email as Rita the cleaner. She had no recourse but to apologize and promise to do better. The other cleaners had noticed Colton's fixation on the new girl and tried to warn her Reggie, an old cleaner. At the company pulled Naomi aside died after a particularly brutal criticism session that left her hands shaking as she restocked her cleaning cart. You need to stay out of his way, Reggie advised, glancing over his shoulder to ensure they weren't overheard. Then an incident occurred on Thursday night of her first week. Naomi was cleaning the hallway outside the main conference room on the executive floor, her cart neatly positioned against the wall to allow easy pass message. The floor was almost empty at 11:30 p.m., with most offices dark and their occupants long gone. She had just finished refilling her bucket with fresh cleaning solution when she heard the distinctive sound of Colton's leather dress shoes on the marble floor. As he neared Naomi, he stopped directly beside her cleaning cart, surveying her work with exaggerated scrutiny. What happened next was no accident. As Colton resumed walking, he deliberately swung his arm out, catching the side of Naomi's perfectly organized cleaning cart, which sent it crashing down with a loud thud. Colton paused, surveying the disaster he created. With a barely suppressed smile, he continued walking, stepping directly through the spilled cleaning solution. Leaving footprints across the floor Naomi had spent the last hour perfecting, he never looked back, never acknowledged what he'd done, never offered to help or apologize to him. It wasn't even worth mentioning. Naomi stood frozen, staring at the wreckage before her. In that moment, something fundamental shifted in her understanding of Bennett Innovations. This wasn't just about disrespect or invisibility. This was calculated cruelty, the deliberate abuse of power with no fear of consequences as she knelt to begin cleaning up the mess, fighting back tears of frustration and rage. This wasn't just about understanding the company culture anymore. This wasn't just about proving herself worthy of succession. This was about justice for the invisible workforce that kept Bennett Innovations functioning, the people her father had once been part of before building his empire. When Colton's racist works escalated in the days that followed, Naomi was prepared. She documented everything, times, dates, witnesses, and exact quotes she observed, which executives enabled his behavior and which seemed uncomfortable but said nothing. She built a case piece by piece, all while maintaining her cover as Rita, the invisible cleaner. Colton came back a few minutes later. "You think you're clever, don't you?" he hissed, stepping closer. Naomi remained silent, aware that anything she said would only escalate the situation she focused on. Gathering her cleaning supplies, intending to move to the next office on her rotation and escape the confrontation. "I'm speaking to you," Colton snapped the proper response. When a supervisor addresses you as "yes, sir," or "no, sir," didn't they teach you basic respect in whatever gutter they pulled you from? "Yes, sir. Sorry, sir," she replied, the words tasting bitter in her mouth. She had just begun mopping the hallway outside the executive conference room when Colton deliberately stepped onto the freshly cleaned surface, leaving dirty footprints across the wet floor. "This floor is still filthy," he announced loudly as if speaking to an audience. Though they were alone in the corridor, "Can't you do anything right? Look at these stains. Look at these spots you've missed." Naomi glanced down at the immaculate floor, gleaming under the recessed lighting. There were no stains except the footprints Colton himself had just created. There were no spots except where he now stood. I just cleaned it, sir, she explained politely, maintaining her composure through sheer force of will. It was dry and spotless before. Are you contradicting me again? Colton interrupted his voice, dropping to a dangerous quiet. Do you think you know more about cleanliness standards at Bennett Innovations than I do? I will show you where you belong today. And without a word, he took a full cup of water and poured the entire water directly onto Naomi. The cold water drenched her hair, ran down her face, soaked through her uniform shirt, and pulled at her feet on the freshly mopped floor. The shock of the cold liquid made her gasp, but it was the deliberate, cruel why of the act that stole her breath entirely. Now you have something real to clean up. Colton said, his voice eerily calm as he dropped the empty cup onto the floor beside her. And don't even think about leaving until you're dry. And this floor is spotless. I'll be checking personally before you clock out. Have you ever been treated differently because of how you look? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and hit that subscribe button to make sure you don't miss the next part of the story. Naomi stood, frozen water dripping from her hair and clothes, creating puddles around her feet. The humiliation burned hotter than any anger she had ever experienced at that moment. She wasn't Naomi Bennett Wharton, graduate and executive VP. She wasn't even Rita the cleaner. She was simply a human being treated as less than human by someone who knew there would be no consequences for his actions, as water dripped from her soaked uniform. Naomi fought back tears that threatened to mix with the moisture already on her face. She knelt to begin mowing up the water, her soaked clothes clinging uncomfortably to her skin as she worked. She made a silent vow that Colton Myers would face consequences for his actions, not just for what he had done to her, but for the culture of fear and humiliation he had created for the invisible workforce that kept Bennett Innovations running. One would think that Colton was the only one, but there was also Eli Turner, the marketing director at Bennett Innovations, who looked every bit the creative executive at 42. He cultivated a carefully curated image, designer glasses, artfully tiled hair, with just the right bespoke suits that projected success without seeming too corporate. Naomi's first encounter with Eli occurred during her second week undercover. His office was on her cleaning rotation that night, a task that should have taken approximately 20 minutes. According to the standard schedule, it would ultimately consume over 3.5 hours of her shift, leaving her scrambling to complete her other assigned areas before clocking out when Jam first entered his office shortly after 10 p.m. Eli was still working, staring intently at his computer screen. Unlike many executives who either ignored the cleaning staff entirely or briefly acknowledged them before returning to their work, Eli immediately engaged. "Oh, good you're here," he said without looking up from his screen. "This office is an absolute disaster. We had a creative brainstorming session today, and it needs a thorough cleaning." The office appeared relatively tidy to Naomi's now experienced eye. A few coffee cups on a side table, some papers arranged in piles. Nothing that justified his description of absolute disaster. Nevertheless, she nodded and began her standard cleaning routine, starting with emptying the trash bins. Eli watched her work for several minutes, his attention shifting between his computer and her movements around the office as she finished dusting the bookshelves and moved to clean the glass coffee table. He cleared his throat dramatically. "That's not how you clean glass properly," he informed her, rising from his desk to approach. You're leaving streaks everywhere. You need to use circular motions, not straight lines. Eli watched with critical attention, pointing out missed spots and offering unsolicited advice about proper cleaning methods as if his marketing degree had somehow bestowed expert knowledge in professional cleaning techniques. After she had cleaned every surface, vacuumed the carpet, and sanitized touch points, according to protocol, Eli performed a theatrical inspection of the room, running his finger along surfaces and holding them up to the light as if checking for dust. "This simply won't do," he declared with exaggerated disappointment. "The windows still have smudges. The carpet has visible lint. And did you even dust the top of the picture frames? I'm going to need you to start over and do it properly this time." Naomi looked at the immaculate office in disbelief. There were no visible issues with any of the areas he had mentioned. But as Rita the cleaner, she had no authority to contradict him with a quiet, "Yes, sir." She began the entire cleaning process again from the beginning while Eli returned to his desk. A satisfied expression briefly, crossing his face. The second cleaning was even more meticulous than the first, with Naomi taking extra care with each surface, anticipating his criticism. When she finished, Eli once again performed his inspection ritual, this time focusing on entirely different areas. "The baseboards are still dusty and my desk wasn't properly organized," he claimed, though. She had been specifically instructed never to touch papers or personal items on desks. "And what's that smell? Did you use the wrong cleaning solution? This room should smell fresh and clean, not like chemicals." The cycle repeated a third time, with Eli finding new increasingly trivial issues after each cleaning. By the time he finally declared himself satisfied and left for the night, it was well past midnight and Naomi was significantly behind schedule on her other assignments. Soon enough, Naomi learned that Derek's behavior was a well-established pattern. He would regularly demand multiple cleanings of his already pristine office, manufacturing flaws to justify his demands. He would leave coffee cups balanced precariously on the edges of trash bins so they would spill when emptied. He would scatter paper clips on freshly vacuumed carpets and then complain about poor cleaning quality after the water bottle incident with Colton. Naomi had decided to test the company's reporting structures if Bennett Innovations truly valued dignity and respect. As stated in its corporate values, surely the Human Resources Department would address such blatant abuse. Kay Lawson, the HR director, presented herself as the perfect person to approach in her mid-40s with a warm smile and business casual style that was more casual than business. Tina cultivated an approachable image. The employee support posters throughout the building featured her photo and an invitation to talk to me. "Your voice matters." Her office door displayed a rainbow sticker and the words "Safe Space Face" in friendly typography. During her lunch break the day after Colton's assault with the water bottle, Naomi cautiously approached Tina's office. The HR director welcomed her with a smile that seemed genuine, offering her a seat and even a cup of coffee from her personal machine. "What can I do for you today?" Tina asked her, tone warm and encouraging. "I don't think we've met before. Are you new to the cleaning staff?" Naomi explained that she was indeed new, and then hesitantly described the incident with Colton, the public humiliation, and finally the water bottle. She kept her account factual and unemotional, precisely the way she would have advised an employee to report misconduct in her role as executive VP. Tina's expression remained sympathetic throughout the recounting. her head tilted slightly in what appeared to be genuine concern. When Naomi finished, the HR director sighed deeply and reached across the desk to Pat, her hand in a gesture that straddled the line between comforting and condescending. "First, I want to thank you for bringing this to my attention." Tina began, her voice taking on the careful cadence of rehearsed corporate speech. "We take all reports of workplace incidents very seriously at Bennett Innovations. That said, I think there may be some confusion about workplace relationships here." Tina continued, her tone still gentle, but now tinged with something else, a subtle dismissiveness that hadn't been there before. "You're just a cleaner and should know your place in a company like this. You can't compare yourself to other employees." The message was clear beneath the corporate jargon. You don't really count as employees. Your dignity is not our concern. Naomi thanked Tina for her time. As she rose to leave, Tina offered one last bit of advice. Her voice lowered as if sharing confidence between us. "Colton can be demanding when it comes to cleanliness standards. He has high expectations and sometimes his communication style is a bit direct. My suggestion would be to focus on meeting those standards rather than taking things personally in corporate environments. F-Skin is an asset with that final dismissal, thinly disguised as mentorship." Naomi was effectively shown the door. The safe space sign seemed to mock her as she left, its promise apparently not extending to those who clean the building after hours. What Tina didn't know was that Naomi had secretly recorded their entire conversation on her phone documentation that would later become crucial evidence of how systematically the company failed its most vulnerable workers. But if Colton and Eli's cruelty had shown Naomi the systematic nature of workplace abuse, her encounter with Danielle Knox would reveal its most shocking physical manifestation. Danielle Knox, Senior Vice President of Sales, was a legend at Bennett Innovations. Her sales team consistently outperformed targets. Her presentations at industry conferences were standing room only events, and her aggressive negotiation style had secured contracts that transformed the company's market position at 46. She had the confidence of someone who knew her value to the organization and the temperament of someone unaccustomed to being contradicted. The confrontation occurred on Friday evening of Naomi's third week undercover. She had been assigned to clean the main conference room on the 37th floor. Danielle's sharp voice cut through the air. "Excuse me, where do you think you're going?" Naomi paused, surprised by the direct address. "I'm sorry for interrupting, ma'am. This room is scheduled for cleaning at 900 p.m. I'll come back later when you're finished." It was a reasonable response, polite and professional in any normal workplace interaction. It would have been the end of the matter. But Danielle Knox didn't operate according to normal workplace conventions. "How dare you disrupt my meeting?" she snapped, stepping closer to Naomi. "Do I have to waste my valuable time explaining basic professional courtesy to someone who cleans toilets for a living?" The verbal assault was loud enough that employees in nearby offices had begun to glance through the glass walls of the conference room, watching the confrontation unfold. But like the sails inside, choosing not to intervene, Naomi had weathered Colton's water and Derek's humiliation. But something about Danielle's was just too much. Perhaps the sheer injustice of being berated for simply following the assigned schedule triggered a response that was pure Naomi Bennett, rather than the differential Rita. "With all due respect," she said, her voice quiet but firm, "I am following the established protocol for this building. If there's a conflict with the cleaning schedule, The proper procedure is to notify facility management in advance, so adjustments can be made. I'm simply trying to do my job just as you're doing yours. The conference room fell completely silent. The junior salespeople froze. Expressions locked in shocked disbelief that a cleaner would dare respond to Danielle Wells in such a manner, for Danielle herself seemed momentarily stunned by the articulate pushback from someone she had dismissed as a nobody. The silence lasted only seconds before Danielle's face contorted with rage. Without warning, her hands swung out in a sharp arc, connecting with Naomi's cheek with a crack that echoed through the silent conference room. The force of the slap snapped Naomi's head to the side and sent her stumbling back against her cleaning. "See, don't you ever talk back to me?" Danielle hissed, her voice low and dangerous. "You are nothing here, nothing clean. This room now, or don't bother coming back tomorrow." Pain bloomed across Naomi's cheek, but it was nothing compared to the shock that froze her in place in all her years in corporate America, through Wharton Business School, and the executive ranks. She had never witnessed such a blatant physical assault in a professional environment, let alone experienced it personally before junior salespeople in the room stared at their laptops, their notes, the ceiling, anywhere. But at the assault they had just witnessed, no one spoke, no one objected, no one offered assistance. Their collective silence was its own form of violence, the tacit agreement that what had happened was acceptable, or at least not worth risking their careers to address at that moment. Naomi nearly broke character. The impulse to reveal herself, to transform from Rita the cleaner to Naomi Bennett, executive vice president and daughter of the founder, was almost overwhelming. One sentence could have ended Danielle's career instantly, but some deeper instinct held her back. And so, with a discipline that surprised even herself, Naomi maintained her cover. She lowered her eyes, mumbled an apology, and began cleaning the conference room. The red mark on Naomi's cheek burned with humiliation, but her mind had never been clearer. This was her breaking point, not because the slap was more painful than Colton's assault or Derek's humiliation, but because it represented the culmination of a pattern that could no longer be ignored. Bennett Innovations, the company her father had built on principles of dignity and respect, had become a place where employees could be physically assaulted without consequence or comment, as she mechanically wiped down surfaces around the oblivious sales team. Naomi's mission transformed. She was no longer just observing the company culture or gathering general impressions. She was now collecting evidence for what would become the most significant corporate restructuring in Bennett Innovations history. Every interaction, every abuse, every failure of leadership would be documented, names would be recorded, incidents would be dated and detailed. And when her 2 weeks undercover were complete, the reckoning would begin. If you were in Naomi's shoes, what would you do to them? All share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and hit that subscribe button to make sure you don't miss the next part of the story. By the end of her second week undercover, Naomi Bennett had experienced enough mistreatment to justify ending her experiment and returning to her executive role. She had witnessed systemic abuse from multiple leaders, experienced both verbal and physical assault. Naomi's first step was to create a secure system for collecting evidence. The cleaning cart provided perfect cover. No one paid attention to the supplies arranged in its various compartments, giving her ample opportunity to conceal a small, powerful camera and digital voice recorder among the bottles and rags. Her phone kept silenced in her pocket, allowed her to capture still images when necessary, though she used it sparingly to avoid detection. Her nights took on a new pattern while continuing to perform her cleaning duties with the same careful attention. As before, she now strategically positioned herself to document conversations in meeting rooms, photograph documents left carelessly on desks, and record the after-hours interactions that revealed the true culture of Bennett Innovations. Soon Naomi had amassed a damning collection of evidence, documenting with the recordings she discovered the three people who had made her life miserable as a cleaner had more secrets they were keeping. They've been secretly diverting some of the company's funds meant for lower workers into their own pockets, also delivering the company's information to their competitors in an attempt to get Mr. Malcolm out as the CEO before the succession happens. The evidence was overwhelming and irrefutable. As the end of her planned undercover period approached, Naomi faced a critical decision about how to proceed. Simply presenting the evidence to her father would address the immediate conspiracy, but might not solve the deeper cultural issues that had allowed such corruption to flourish. A more public approach risked damaging the company's reputation, harming innocent employees in the process. After gathering overwhelming evidence of systematic abuse, discrimination, and conspiracy at Bennett Innovations, Naomi Bennett faced her most significant challenge, yet how to expose the corruption in a way that would lead to meaningful change rather than mere damage control. The final phase of her undercover journey would require perfect timing, strategic thinking, and the courage to confront the people who had humiliated and abused her over the past month. The preparation began on Friday evening week undercover. After finishing her shift and ensuring no one was following her, she changed into her own clothes in a public restroom several blocks from Bennett Innovations headquarters. The transformation was dramatic. The headscarf removed her natural hair, styled with professional precision designer glasses, replacing the plain frames of her disguise. Subtle makeup enhancing features she had deliberately downplayed for weeks. She took a rideshare to her father's home in the exclusive Maplewood neighborhood, a modernist mansion whose glass walls offered panoramic views of the city skyline, including the Bennett Innovations Tower, where she had been scrubbing floors hours earlier. The physical distance between these worlds was measured in miles, but the psychological distance felt incalculable after her month in the trenches. Malcolm Bennett was waiting in his home office, his expression grave. "You look exhausted," he said simply, studying her face with paternal concern. "I am," Naomi admitted, "but not just physically. I'm emotionally exhausted by what I've discovered for the next 3 hours." She methodically presented her findings using her laptop to display emails, performance reviews, financial discrepancies, and video evidence of abuse. She documented the systematic mistreatment of support staff. Malcolm listened in silence, his expression darkening as the evidence mounted when she showed him the video of Danielle Knox slapping Rita. The cleaner, his fist clenched involuntarily when she played the recording of Colton Myers pouring water on her. His jaw tightened with barely controlled anger. "They've betrayed everything this company stands for," he said, his voice quiet but vibrating with intensity. "Everything I've built, everything I believed in." Naomi nodded, understanding that her father's reaction wasn't just about the personal affront to his daughter, but about the violation of the principles upon which he had built his life's work. The question is, she said, how do we address this in a way that creates real change together? They developed a strategy that would expose the corruption publicly. Malcolm would call an emergency board meeting for Monday morning to discuss urgent company concerns that had come to his attention. All department heads and senior management would be required to attend, including Colton Tina, Ely Julian, and Danielle, the five executives. At the center of the conspiracy, the board members would be briefed in advance on the general nature of the issues, but not on the specific evidence or Naomi's undercover role. This would ensure their genuine reactions when the full situation was revealed. Most importantly, Naomi would continue her role as Rita the cleaner through Monday morning, maintaining her cover until the precise moment of revelation. This would require one final night of humiliation, but it would be worth it for the justice that would follow. Their planning continued well past midnight, addressing contingencies and refining the approach before Naomi left. Malcolm hugged her again, this time with a new respect in his eyes. "I thought this experience would teach you about leadership," he said, "but it seems you're teaching me whatever happens Monday. I want you to know I'm proud of you, not just as my daughter, but as the future of Bennett Innovations." By Sunday night, everything was in place. The board had been notified, the evidence was prepared, and security personnel had been quietly briefed on potential responses. When the revelations became public, all that remained was the confrontation itself and Naomi's final performance as Rita the cleaner. Monday morning dawned clear and bright, sunlight gleaming off the glass and steel of the Bennett Innovations Tower. As Naomi arrived in her cleaner's uniform for what would be her last shift in disguise, she had deliberately scheduled herself for the executive floor, ensuring she would be assigned to clean the boardroom before the 10 a.m. emergency meeting at 8:30 a.m. As executives began arriving for their normal workday, unaware of the reckoning to come, Naomi pushed her cleaning cart toward the executive boardroom on the 43rd floor. The space was impressive. A massive oval table of polished walnuts surrounded by leather chairs that she had just begun dusting when Colton Myers entered, his expression sour at finding her there. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, briefcase clutched in one hand and coffee in the other. "This room needs to be perfect for an emergency board meeting at 10. I'm assigned to clean it," Sir Naomi replied, maintaining the deferential tone she had perfected over the past month. "I'll be finished well before 10. Colton's eyes narrowed as he surveyed the room. "Make sure it's actually clean this time. The CEO and board members will be here. If I find a single speck of dust, you'll be fired. I'll check your work before the meeting." He added his tone, making clear that he was hoping to find fault. "Now get moving. People will be arriving soon by 9:46 a.m. Executives and board members had begun gathering outside the boardroom, their expressions confused or concerned about the UN expected meeting. Malcolm Bennett arrived last, acknowledging greetings, with brief nods but offering no explanation for the emergency session. His eyes briefly met Naomi's as she mopped near the door, a subtle glance that contained volumes of unspoken communication before he turned away to maintain their cade at 9:55 a.m. Colton returned to inspect the boardroom, making a show of checking surfaces for dust and running his finger along the windowsill as executives began taking their seats around the table. "You missed spots on the windows," he announced loudly. Though the glass was immaculate, and the table hasn't been properly polished. This is exactly the kind of sloppy work I've come to expect from new people. I'll take care of it right away, sir. Naomi responded, moving to recon areas that needed no attention as the clock hit 10 a.m. Malcolm Bennett called the meeting to order, his authoritative voice cutting through the murmured conversations around the table. Naomi continued cleaning in the background, moving quietly around the room's perimeter, seemingly focused on her work, but missing nothing of the discussion. I've called this emergency meeting to address serious concerns about the corporate culture at Bennett Innovations. Malcolm began, his tone grave. Over the past month, evidence has come to my attention suggesting that we've strayed significantly from the core values upon which I built this company. The room fell silent, executives exchanging uneasy glances. Tina from HR straightened in her seat, pen poised over her notepad, as if preparing to document solutions to a problem she had helped create. Eli Turner maintained his carefully cultivated creative persona, though his fingers drummed nervously on the table. Julian Parks adjusted his tie repeatedly, while Danielle Knox maintained a mask of professional interest that revealed nothing of her thoughts. Get out. Colton shouted, trying to get rid of the cleaning lady. This is sensitive corporate business. The moment had arrived, the culmination of the 2 weeks of humiliation, documented action, and strategic patience. All eyes turned briefly toward the unassuming cleaner in the gray uniform, expecting her to scurry from the room as commanded. Instead, Naomi set her mop carefully against the wall. She straightened to her full height, squared her shoulders, and turned to face the assembled executives with a calm dignity that immediately commanded attention. Looking directly at Colton Myers, she spoke in a clear, confident voice that bore no resemblance to Rita's deferential tones. Actually, I'd like to stay. Colton Naomi interrupted, using his first name with the casual authority of someone who had every right to do so. But I think you're the one who doesn't understand the situation with deliberate movements. She removed the headscarf that had covered her hair, letting her natural curls frame her face. She took off the plain glasses that had been part of her disguise, reaching into her pocket to replace them with her designer frames. Finally, she unzipped the gray cleaner's uniform to reveal a professionally tailored blazer and blouse underneath. The transformation was electric around the table. Expressions shifted from confusion to shock as recognition dawned. These executives had all worked with Naomi Bennett for years. They had attended meetings with her rep, reported to her, discussed strategy with her, yet none had recognized her beneath the disguise of Rita, because they had never truly seen the cleaning staff as people worthy of notice. Why Naomi Bennett and the new CEO of this company as my dad's successor, she announced, though by now no introduction was necessary. Everyone was bewildered. Nobody expected that the cleaner they accumulated was now their CEO. The silence in the room was absolute. Everyone's mouth was wide open. Naomi tapped a small remote she retrieved from her pocket, advancing the presentation to specific evidence. I've been gathering documentation on the toxic culture in this company, a culture that contradicts everything Bennett Innovations claims to stand for. Video appeared on screen. Colton Myers pouring water on Rita, captured from a security camera angle. Low that showed his face clearly, the timestamp and location were visible in the corner, leaving no room for denial. Colton's face drained of color as he watched himself on screen, his habitual arrogance crumbling in the face of undeniable evidence. That's taken out of context. She was insubordinate and pouring water on an employee is assault. Colton Naomi cut him off calmly. There is no context that makes it acceptable. The presentation advanced again this time, showing Eli Turner in his office, forcing Rita to clean the same surfaces repeatedly while making increasingly trivial complaints. Eli Turner, marketing director, has routinely abused his authority to waste cleaning staff time, forcing repeated unnecessary work and creating deliberate dominance. Eli started to speak, but Naomi continued without allowing interruption, moving systematically through the evidence she had gathered. As the evidence mounted, some board members began taking notes furiously. Others sat back with expressions of shock or disgust. One elderly board member removed his glasses, polished them as if the action might somehow change what he was seeing, then shook his head in disbelief when the evidence remained just as damning. Danielle Knox was the first to attempt defense, her sales executive instincts pushing her to control the narrative. This is a gross mischaracterization. That video has clearly been edited to make it look like Naomi cut her off. By advancing to the next slide, a different camera angle of the same incident showing the slap from a perspective that captured both Danielle's face and the shocked reactions of the witnesses. Would you like me to play the audio as well, Miss Knox? Your exact words were, "Don't you ever talk back to me. You are nothing here, nothing." Danielle fell silent, her carefully constructed professional image shattered beyond repair. By the time Naomi concluded her presentation, the atmosphere in the boardroom had transformed completely. The arrogance and entitlement that had characterized the accused executives had crumbled into a mix of shock, fear, and desperate calculation of possible escapes from the situation. Colton Myers, seeing the writing on the wall, knew it was over for him. "I thought you were just an ordinary cleaner. Please don't let me lose my job." The door opened just after revealing two security officers who had been stationed outside Mr. Myers. "We've been instructed to ensure you leave the premises after this meeting." Colton turned back to face Malcolm. Bennett's expression, a mix of disbelief and fury. "You can't be serious after everything I've done for this company, after everything you've done to this company." Malcolm corrected, standing to address the room for the first time since Naomi had begun her presentation. "What we've witnessed today isn't just about individual behavior, though that alone would warrant immediate termination. This is about a fundamental betrayal of everything Bennett Innovation stands for." He moved to stand beside his daughter, a physical demonstration of solidarity that sent a clear message to everyone present. "Naomi undertook this investigation at my request as part of our succession planning process. What neither of us anticipated was the level of corruption, discrimination, and abuse she would uncover." Malcolm turned to address the board members. I founded this company on principles of integrity, innovation, and respect for every individual who contributes to our success. Somewhere along the way, we lost sight of those values today. We begin the process of reclaiming them. The next hour was devoted to immediate actions. The board terminated Colton Myers, Tina Lawson, Eli Turner, and Danielle Knox for gross misconduct, effective immediately. SEC, security was instructed to escort them from the building after they surrendered company devices and access credentials. They were all fired. Colton's departure was equally revealing as security prepared to escort him from the boardroom. He turned to Malcolm with a desperate appeal. 30 years. "Malcolm, I've given this company 30 years. You can't just throw that away based on a few incidents taken out of context. Malcolm's response was measured but unyielding. You're right, Colton, 30 years is significant, which makes it all the more disappointing that you chose to use your position to abuse those with less power, rather than to embody the values this company was built on. As Colton was led away, Naomi felt a complex mix of emotions. Satisfaction at justice served the meeting, continued with discussion of immediate steps to address the cultural issues revealed by Jasmine's investigation. As the meeting concluded, board members approached Naomi individually, some offering congratulations on her thorough investigation, others expressing shock and apologies for the treatment she had endured throughout. She maintained the calm, strategic demeanor that had allowed her to gather the evidence while enduring weeks of abuse, the same qualities that would serve her well as CEO when the boardroom finally emptied. Leaving only Naomi and her father Malcolm embraced her with pride, evident in every aspect of his posture. "You've done something remarkable here," he said quietly. "Not just exposing corruption, but experiencing firsthand what needs to change. I couldn't have done it. My pride wouldn't have allowed me to maintain that cover through what you endured." Naomi's eyes filled with unexpected tears, not from the memory of humiliation, but from the realization of how deeply this experience had transformed her understanding of leadership. Malcolm nodded. "The board wants to accelerate the succession timeline. After today's presentation, they're convinced you're ready." Naomi looked out over the city skyline, considering the weight of responsibility she was about to assume and the changes she intended to implement. "I am ready," she agreed, "but not because I'm your daughter or because I have the right degrees. I'm ready because I've seen this company from the bottom up. I've experienced what works and what desperately needs to change." She picked up the gray cleaner's uniform she had discarded during her revelation, folding it carefully rather than dismissively. "This taught me more about leadership than Wharton ever could, and I won't forget those lessons when I'm sitting at the head of this table." As they left the boardroom together, Naomi paused by the cleaning cart she had pushed for 15 days. "There's one more thing I need to do before this becomes official." The transformation of Bennett Innovations didn't happen overnight. Cultural change required consistent effort, honest confrontation of remaining problems, and the humility to acknowledge that perfection remained elusive. There were setbacks and challenges, resistance from some who benefited from the old system, and the inevitable complications of implementing broad structural changes in a large organization. But 7 months after Naomi's undercover journey ended, Bennett Innovations had become a fundamentally different company, one where employees at all levels reported higher job satisfaction, productivity measures showed consistent improvement, and turnover rates dropped significantly, particularly among previously underrepresented groups for Naomi herself. The experience created personal transformation as profound as the organizational changes she implemented. The physical hardships of cleaning work had changed her bodybuilding strength and endurance. She hadn't known she needed the emotional challenges of being treated as invisible had deepened her empathy and sharpened her perception of power dynamics in ways her privileged upbringing and education never could. These changes were visible in how she operated as a leader in executive meetings. She noticed who spoke and who was interrupted, consciously creating space for diverse perspectives. When visiting departments, she greeted maintenance staff by name, with the same respect afforded to directors. Her decisions were formed by a 360-degree understanding of how they would affect everyone in the organization, not just those with titles similar to hers. 3 months after the boardroom confrontation, Malcolm Bennett officially announced his retirement and Naomi's succession as CEO, and the company in the remaining years grew abundantly under her leadership. If you love this story, don't forget to like this video and hit that subscribe button. Now see you in the next video.